In a serene valley nestled between two majestic mountains lay a quaint little village called Eldervale. Known for its picturesque landscapes and its vibrant community, Eldervale was like many other villages, filled with laughter, gossip, and the occasional conflict. But out of all its inhabitants, there stood one man whose name was whispered in every corner: Simon, the honest man. Simon was not a tall man, nor was he particularly handsome. He wore a simple, hand-me-down tunic and often sported a scruffy beard. Yet Simon possessed a rare quality: integrity. His word was his bond, and he believed that honesty was the cornerstone of any relationship, be it personal or commercial. In a world that often tempted others to cut corners or bend the truth, Simon stuck to his principles. He was a farmer by trade, sowing seeds and reaping the harvest with a steadfast dedication that earned the respect of many. However, not everyone in Eldervale appreciated Simon. His unwavering honesty often made the villagers uncomfortable, for they were accustomed to bending the truth to smooth over their own lives. Simon's virtue stood in stark contrast to their little lies and half-truths. When he would point out the flaws in their excuses or call out dishonesty, it ruffled feathers and drew sneers from the crowd. The more Simon stood his ground, the more the villagers began to mock him. They would gather in the village square, laughing at his devotion to honesty and calling him the fool with a heart too big. The turning point: one fateful autumn day, news spread through Eldervale like wildfire. A travelling merchant was coming to town. He brought news of a magnificent festival occurring in the neighbouring kingdom. The villagers were buzzing with excitement and energy as they dreamed of the riches the merchant might offer. In this frenzy, Simon remained cautious. When the merchant arrived, he began to sell various goods, flaunting the beauty and allure of his products. However, Simon noticed that the weight of the merchant's scales was altered, and the quality of the goods was not as advertised. "Excuse me," Simon interjected as the villagers eagerly queued to purchase. "I believe there's a discrepancy in the weight of those barrels." Laughter erupted from the crowd. "Simon the Honest is back at it," someone shouted. "Why ruin the fun? Just let us buy and dream." Yet Simon persisted. "Integrity matters. Would you not want a fair trade?" The merchant, seeing an opportunity to leverage the village's disdain for Simon, smiled devilishly and agreed to a public trade showcase. "If this honest man can prove me wrong, I will give away half of my goods." The village gathered for the showdown. Everyone watched as Simon weighed the merchant's goods. Heartbeats raced. The stakes were high. He meticulously noted every detail. When he finally declared the merchant's scales faulty, a hush fell over the crowd. The merchant laughed, confident in his deception. But when Simon revealed the truth behind the scales, the gasps and murmurs transitioned to an uneasy silence. The crowd began to question their own beliefs, and the merchant abruptly lost his charm. The villagers turned on Simon, though, blaming him for spoiling their chance at riches. They threw insults at him, and though he stood resolutely, it began to wear on him. As days turned into weeks, Simon found himself increasingly isolated. The villagers, still grappling with their feelings of discomfort, continued to mock him behind his back. Yet he felt a stirring within his spirit, a deep, unwavering conviction that his honesty served a greater purpose. He continued to farm his land, working diligently, and began to cultivate a small vegetable garden that grew with love and care. As he toiled away, He shared his produce with families in need, reminding him that kindness and integrity were still valuable, even in the eyes of a mocking crowd. One snowy winter, Eldervale was struck by a severe blizzard. Essential supplies dwindled and panic set in. The communal grain store, which had been hoarded by several families under false pretenses, ran dry. With food supplies low, the village faced a grim winter. People turned to Simon, the only one whose integrity and honest dealings had resulted in a small surplus of food from his garden. Hesitant, and remembering their mockery, the villagers approached him. "Simon," they pleaded, "we are in dire need. Will you help us?" Simon, despite the hurt from their past actions, opened his doors to share what he had. As villagers gathered outside his home, he offered portions of his crops, volunteering not for reward or recognition, but from a place of deep-rooted empathy. As the villagers consumed the food and relished in its freshness, a realization dawned upon them. The bitter taste of mockery lost its flavor against the nourishing taste of integrity. They reflected on their actions and how they had treated Simon, the honest man who had always sought to protect them, even at their expense. During this period of need, the bonds of community began to heal. They acknowledged that Simon's values were not foolishness, but strength. The mockery transformed into gratitude as they began to mend their relationships, slowly turning the tide. As spring approached, Eldervale decided to host a festival to celebrate their unity and newfound appreciation for honesty and integrity. All of the villagers collaborated to prepare for a day of joy, laughter, and togetherness. Simon was invited to lead the festival, and as villagers hung decorations and prepared food, he realized the depth of their change. They apologized for their past mockery and honored him for his devotion to honesty, understanding that integrity brings communities together. On the day of the festival, Simon spoke to the gathered villagers. "Integrity is not always visible in the moment," he said, "but it weathers the storms and ultimately leads to the sunshine of sincerity." Years passed, and the village of Eldervale thrived, its people learning that integrity had the power to uplift and unite. The spirit of Simon became woven into the fabric of the village, inspiring future generations to cherish truth and honesty above all. Children grew up hearing the tales of the fool with a heart too big. They marveled at how once mocked honesty saved their community and learned to hold dear the value of integrity, just like Simon. The village that once mocked the honest man came to respect and celebrate him, realizing that integrity outlives mockery. Simon's legacy continued long after he had walked the earth, for his values carved paths in the hearts of men and women, filling Eldervale with truth, community, and resilience against the tides of time. And so, Eldervale blossomed, rooted firmly in the soil of honesty, blooming in the light of unity, forever reminded that true wealth is found in the truth we choose to carry forward together.